Hello everyone. Hello everyone, this is Talisman Skulls here, founder of Sadutra and Arc Warlock. I'm going to go right into just kind of giving kind of a chronology of things, why I personally think the whole UFO thing is crap because of its mixed with occultism, misidentification, and people just losing their fucking minds. Alright. 1800s. Well, around whatever, people were already saying there must be canals on Mars. So they already had a thought of Martians. Look it up. A guy that had that idea was Giovanni Schiaffino. I can't even pronounce it. It's an Italian guy. Anyway, and then just a couple of years, about 20 years later, you have H.G. Wells and other sci-fi writers already creating shit, and basically with the science of understanding of the day, and created this story called War of the Worlds, which is based off a two-part thing inspired by the whole so-called aliens from Mars. What if they had, high technology and decided to pull a British Empire thing and wipe everybody out that was just simply in the way, referring to imperialist Britain's colonial plans, more or less, taking everything over to extend its own empire. About that same time, there was occult writers like Eliphas Levi that started coming up with the idea of the whole inverted everything must represent, the Gnostic idea that all world, material things are evil, everything upright is spiritual things that are entirely good, and the whole bullshit like Templars myth that was fucking created by him, and then the name Baphomet to represent the whole, totality of the paradox or shadow side of the androgynous divine in the transgendered evil version, based off a weird mix of that and Zoroastrian dualism and all that other bullshit that went into it. So a lot of the mythology you find based around Knights Templar really does go right to the occult there and has no basis in actual history. Okay, but this also inspired people like Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley in the 1970s created the image of the so-called great alien, called it Lamb, and it was originally a self-projection or reflection of self called the Tupla, and he was trying to get it empowered by using everybody's fears and fantasies and delusions and everything else to try and create a thought form that he could try and transfer himself psychically into, and then literally try to become a living god. Pretty much the whole fucking thing there. He failed. He died in 1947, along with a bunch of other weird shit that went down in 1947. In 1920s, the whole New Age thing was the first run of it. Got its really big boom in Germany, primarily, and the Nazi Party was one of those groups. By the 1930s, the Nazi Party was officially part of German government under Hitler. Go figure. And everybody was on edge for a fucking German invasion. 1941, we end up with a bunch of shit involving Pearl Harbor, balloons basically being set out with explosives, and in 1942, kind of a paranoia thing, the army starts shooting at a fucking cloud formation, but couldn't admit that they were shooting at a fucking cloud information and kept swearing up and down it was actually there. They weren't exactly that efficient, and they were fucking trigger happy. It's just that simple. By 1944, again, just a couple of years later, the Nazi Bell was already successfully created and successfully developing weapons-grade plutonium and shit like that, using mercury and other things as a way to extract that, using high power, and that's what the whole, need for big power was all about, because they needed something to power that in the first place. It was the first run of creating atom bombs. And it was also the same time that they were developing the Horton 229, which was the first actual jet fighter that was supposed to be equipped eventually with those warheads to fly under British radar and shit like that, and bomb their asses and possibly invade the U.S. through New York and everything else. Just prior to that, 1938, was about time Orson Welles had everybody on a fucking panic attack with the whole War of the Worlds thing, rereading H.G. Wells' version. of that, and as a Halloween thing, and people thought New York was actually blown up. So there you go. So it all pretty much ties together. 1947 or 1945, Hitler pretty much puts a bullet to his fucking brain because Germany's infrastructure was already falling apart, Germany, and the Allied forces were going in, snagging everything they could. And that included the then Soviet Union, the United States, and the British Empire, more or less. The U.S. grabbed things like the Horton 229, got a hold of the Nazi bell before the rest, and the other bits of technology, rocketry and whatever, went to Russia, and we don't even know what all the shit is that the British got, but they got a good chunk of shit themselves. About 5 months later, we dropped the A-bomb on Japan, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Supposedly the war to end all wars. Yeah, that didn't work out too well, did it? About the 1950s, you got people with a whole bunch of new sci-fi coming out, mixing up all these crazy ideas, partly as a pun, but also a lot of spy planes were being thrown around out there by like the CIA and the FBI and various military infrastructures that were already in place, the so-called military-industrial complex shit. Doing different contracts with different factions of government that didn't exactly see eye to eye anyways in the U.S. as well as in other countries. And so there was kind of like a war within, you know, an internal war between the two parts of Big Brother, so to speak. So they were also doing illegal experiments on people involving everything from exposing them to germ warfare to LSD without people realizing what was going on. This was going on well into the 70s, early part of the 80s. Which got some people in trouble, but most of it was kind of swept under the rug. Look it up. So a lot of the alien stuff was actually created by groups like the CIA and everything else as a smokescreen, knowing that the general public would pretty much take all these different bits, mush it together, and there you go. 1947 is also the same time that Aleister Crowley dies. So all his weird artwork, imagery, occultism, and stuff like that gets recirculated again, which inspires other occultists through groups that were already meeting up and discussing this kind of shit through this thing called the Occult Observer in England at the time, which is where you get groups like founders like Harold Gardner on Wicca, which is what they actually was how you pronounce that everybody keeps saying Wicca, but they didn't actually call themselves that originally. They just referred to themselves as the Bricketwood Coven, which people like Ross Nichols and everything else was actually the editor of some of the works, and eventually founded his own group, Neo Druidry, which itself was just as wacky, and a lot of masonry is involved in that nonsense. The whole Atlantis mythology is all part of the wacky world of nonsense in all of that shit. So there you go. Which is also heavily written with a lot of fucking racism, superior white race, Aryan people, supposedly more advanced, came from Atlantis and tried to disseminate knowledge throughout the world, and they tied that in with the Aryan invasion mythologies created in the 1700s by some Englishmen, because they couldn't accept the fact that people like over in India with the Vedas and everything else could have possibly had such a grand philosophy equal to and even more superior to the Greeks and the Latin Romans that they all had a fucking hard-on over. But hey, whatever, they're fucking wackos, every single fucking one of them. By the later part, we have some of the first flying wings that are basically crashed. We have the Kenneth Arnold picture, which is basically describing flying fucking wings. The best way he could write it down, he wasn't as fucking proficient as he claimed to be, or others tried to claim. But he basically was drawing pictures of the Horton 229. And said that they skipped along the horizon like what looked like saucers being skipped off water. And that's where the term flying saucer became released in the media, which again inspired a whole bunch of the 1950s flying discs and other shit that people started thinking, oh, well, this must be true. Look at what Kenneth Arnold said. Oh, those great things must be what the aliens look like. You know, shit like that. It just went... Well, some of the sci-fi decided to touch on a whole bunch of other nonsense and had people coming out of UFOs dressed with gorilla suits and robot heads. which is probably where you get some of the so-called association with Bigfoot with aliens. But anyway, it's all just one big spin crap after another by psychos. Well, then people took these old mythologies where the stars in the sky represented ancestors, and deified ancestors at that, and turned around and proclaimed that, you know, when they said that these stars were coming down, they literally turned it around so that aliens were coming from the stars. So you see they kind of pull the flip around, and that's where you get some of the occultists kind of hinting at the fact it's bullshit when they say, well, just change the word angel to alien. And, you know, Jesus must be an alien. The devil must be an alien. This is all about aliens wanting to control the world. And it's just more crap. So anyway, so they pretty much took every single creature, entity, or whatever, mixed it in with the occult. The Babylonian shit and the association with Sumeria goes right back to Crowley with the things like the Babylonian working and the black Catholic Mass and all the other weird bullshit that went through his little cult of lamb. And when they're talking about traveling through the tunnels of Set, they're talking about anal butt sex people. Crowley had a fascination for that shit, based off a reading from Tantra that the chakra to awaken the Kundalini tower is at your tailbone. And so he thought, you know, pretty much fuck someone in the ass, it stimulates it, get them locked up with drugs, it awakens it, and kicks in, you know, if you can basically sexually exhaust somebody, you'll get them past the hallucinations, and then it'll awaken the psychic mind, you know, and it just gets weirder and weirder after that. Which is why shows like Mork and Mindy comes out to spoof that crap, and why he's wearing a red suit, the color of the devil, the inverted silver triangle, the cult of lamb, and a whole bunch of fucking traveling around in the egg, and even refers to the invisible big head that he talks to, the invisible voice, as Orson. People just don't get that, because they're stupid. We do end up with the stealth bomber eventually coming out, the B-2, but it's classified for a while until about the 80s. Gorbachev was actually given one by the U.S. as a gift under the Reagan administration, and things like that. We had already had other technology developed by that time, and it does actually trace the Nazi Germany's push to developments right down to the closed caption television and shit like that. Then you had completely independent groups that had nothing to do with the Nazis, but they were part of Germany, so, you know, back in the day, oh, everything German must be Nazi. It was all bullshit, but that's pretty much how that kind of propaganda got spread around. Then we get the resurgence of the New Age bullshit about the 60s with everybody's interest in anti-government this and that, and conspiracy hypotheses all spreading around. You get cult groups like, you know, most of them are parody cults, spoofs, and eventually end up with shit like, you know, philosophic Satanism from Anton LaVey, which is basically a Hollywood joke. It's a circus act, and intellectually shallow reactionary shit, mostly just to kind of prove just how paranoid and stupid most of your religious people can be. And that's really what that part's about. And then you got the real wackos with all the different other forms of Satanism that are just plain fucking loony and literally believe in the Christian concept of things, only in the evil sense. And of course, aliens did it as an alternative excuse for evidence of intelligent design that atheists can't seem to accept. Or they throw in the other nonsense of the anthropic principle, which basically says the universe doesn't really exist until it's observed. But the question is, who's actually observing that causes all of us to still exist? And then, you know, if they die, what happens to the rest of us? It's another fucking smokescreen passed off as science, and it's just philosophical nonsense. It's basically saying put a bag on your fucking head and the world goes away. Anyway, the whole thing there pretty much proves, when you actually do the history from the start to the present, you set aside all the mythology and crap, it's pretty obvious how it all evolves to what it is now. And it's a big fucking joke. Talisman Skulls, peace.